commend the leadership of the executive as led by His Excellency President Ramaphosa on the sterling work done around the issues of COVID. I think the Minister do convey our gratitude and our happiness as a committee to His Excellency and to yourself for the sterling work of dealing with the issues that relates to COVID-19. I think there is a hope generally in our nation that we will defeat this this pandemic. So, members, the agenda is what you see in front of you. And but what is not there in the agenda, because this SCRA and RAASA, they generally are part of the stakeholder of the department. So before I take any presentation, I will just allow the minister to do some introductory remarks on the issues we're dealing with, and then we will then take presentation. But before the presentations, you are all welcomed. Eddie, can you entertain apologies?
Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning, members. I've got only 3 apologies. Mr. Chavane, who's taking his child to the doctor. Mr. Ross, he said he's on study leave. And then Ms. Tito, who's on maternity leave. Those are the 3 only apologies. And then also, I would like also to remind members that when they speak, they must, each member, when you speak, and then you must have your video on, so that when the meeting is being broadcast on TV and also on YouTube, and then they are able to see you. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I want to thank members for acceding to my call that apologies must be directed to the central point, which is the Secretariat. I think they've done that today. Be that as it may, can I take anyone who has any other apologies which did not follow this directive, and or somebody who wants to say something about these apologies? If none, I'm going to give to the minister to just do a helicopter view of the issues we're dealing with. Over to you, Dr. Mtsoaledi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Advocate Bongo, and let me also greet members of the Portfolio Committee. Advocate Bongo, there is some echo there. I don't know whether it's on my side. Something is imitating me. I don't know whether somebody might not have muted.
Eddie, can you attend to what the Honorable Minister is raising?
Chairperson, I don't see anybody who has not muted except you and the Minister. And all the rest have been muted.
Okay. Can I try again, Chair?
Hello.
Chairperson, can I try again? It looks like it's better now.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you once more, Chairperson, and thank you very much for allowing this opportunity. Chairperson, you are very much correct. What I can do is to give a helicopter view. I'm presenting to you 2 committees here: SCRA, the Standing Committee on Refugees Affairs, and RAASA, the Refugee Appeals Authority of South Africa. Both of them, Chairperson, as you have already said, are independent committees of appeal. within the structures of the Department of Home Affairs. They report directly to the minister and the DG because they are independent structures, which means we do not interfere with their decisions, but we are offering them administrative support in terms of the Act. Now, I think the outstanding issue, which they will be presenting to you, Chairperson, and the committee, is that in the past, they built huge backlogs based on two things. Number one, the avalanche of people who came into our country, especially from 2008, looking for asylum due to economic conditions, especially in a country like Zimbabwe, where the number of people who used to come annually to our country since 1998 suddenly increased fourfold to fivefold in a period of a year, and the backlog started building. But secondly, Chairperson, the backlog built up because of the Act under which these two structures were established. You will remember, and I think they will come to explain, that they were hindered by the Act in that, for instance, it will say they can only see people as a quorum of 3 people, meaning if I have to relate it to a court of law, there's always a full bench. In other words, no single case is heard by one judge, but always a full bench. Imagine if that can happen to the legal system, what backlog will be built. So this is exactly what happened to in this situation. But fortunately, as you are aware, we came to Parliament to amend the Act, and the Act has as such been amended. And excuse me, the Act has as such been amended, Chairperson. And for that reason, we are hopeful that things will move very fast because now people are no longer forced to sit as a big panel of in terms of the quorum formed. And also that in the previous Act, it was saying only the chairperson could be a lawyer, meaning the others are not legally trained, and that's why they had to hear a case in a quorum. In the amended Act, we have now put in lawyers who have got the right to hear cases on their own. So these are some of the issues that will be presented. But at the end of the presentation by RAASA, they will also take you through the backlog, the backlog plan that we've put up to try and clear the backlog over the past, in the next 4 years, not in the 68 years that was mentioned by Auditor General at some stage, looking at the situation then. So that situation is going to dramatically change. And as I said last week, we are in discussion with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee to choose a day on which we are going to finally sign the agreement on them helping us with this backlog project. They are going to help us financially and technically in terms of capacity. So let me leave it to them, Chairperson, to present. And then I was just giving you a bird's-eye view that those are some of the things they'll present to you today. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Can we start with the first presentation? From SCRA.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would like to greet the Minister, Dr. Mutwaledi, the Deputy Minister, Advocate Bongo, the Chairperson, and Honorable committee members, and also greet the DHA staff, the DG, Mr. Tommy Makode, and the DDG, Mr. McKay. As indicated, I'm the chairperson of the standing committee. That's to give an overview on who SCRA is and what we actually do and the work that we have done. Page 2. Okay, we get our mandate from the Act, the Refugees Act 130 of 1998 as amended by Act 11 of 2017. In terms of that act, the Standing Committee for Refugee Affairs is established in terms of Section 9A, subsection 1. And in terms of 9A, subsection 2, the Standing Committee is independent and must function without any fear, favor, or prejudice. Exactly what the Honorable Minister was saying. And as the Standing Committee, we make our decision without any influence of the department or any other person. Then in terms of Section 9B, all members of the Standing Committee are legally qualified and appointed by the minister for a period not exceeding 5 years at a time. And that is exactly what is happening. All SCRA members are legally qualified. And in terms of Section 9H, the administrative work connected with the function of the Standing Committee must be performed by officers of the department. Emphasis is must be performed by officers of the department designated by the Director General for that purpose. So all administrative work in our offices are done by officers of the Department of Home Affairs. Then the Standing Committee's role is purely decision-making in nature. Okay, our functions are in terms of Section 9C, the Standing Committee must determine a review in terms of Section 24A. This is a review of decisions of the RSDOs where the asylum seeker claim for refugee status has been rejected as manifestly unfounded, fraudulent, and abusive. And then the Standing Committee must, in the event of an asylum seeker, if the asylum seeker is permitted to work or study in the Republic, determine the conditions. Like, for instance, you cannot have a contract of work which is more than the dates in which you were given by the RRO, the Refugee Reception Offices, may monitor and supervise the decisions taken by the RSDO. So in this case, when we do the monitoring or the supervising, we are able to know whether in making decisions, they are able to take relevant facts in their reason for decisions. And then must advise the minister or DG in any matter referred to it by the minister or DG, including training that may be provided. Any function performed by the Standing Committee in terms of this act must be performed by a single member, and in particular matters, such number of members of the Standing Committee as the chairperson may consider. And let me indicate that this is a serious, a positive development, because it was really very bad at the past that we were unable to make a decision as a single member. We had to wait until you formed a quorum. Like, for instance, if the minister had to appoint 10 people, then 6 would be a quorum, dealing with only one case at a time. Next slide, please. Okay. SCRA mandate continuing. Protection and general rights of the refugees. This is one of our functions in terms of Section 27C. The refugee is entitled to certification in instances where refugees have been in the country for a continuous period of 10 years, and the conditions in their country of origin have not yet improved. So this is one of our functions. And once these people have received certification from the Standing Committee, then it entitles them to apply for permanent residence. Section 36, withdrawals. Only the Standing Committee can withdraw a refugee status. And the Standing Committee must inform. This is the process. You cannot just say, I'm withdrawing your refugee status. The process is you have to send an intention to withdraw to the applicant, to the refugee, and give that refugee time, 30 days, to give representations on why his refugee status shouldn't be withdrawn. Then in terms of Section 36 also, the Standing Committee may withdraw the refugee status if a person has been recognized as a refugee due to fraud, forgery, or false or misleading information of material nature or substantive nature. This may happen in situations where refugees or asylum seekers, they are aware that people from a particular country or a particular region in that country, they are likely to get certification. I can give an example. If a person is from DRC and then says, I am from Goma, knowing that in Goma, there is no peace there, while this person is actually from Kinshasa. So as soon as it is realized that he lied, but already has the refugee status, it has to be sent to the standing committee to withdraw. Whether, or number B, if such a person was recognized due to error or omission or oversight, this is rare to happen. And then number C, standing committee may withdraw the refugee status in terms of section 36 if such a person ceases to qualify for refugee status in terms of section 5. You will note in section 5 there are a lot of points, but I can say some of them, they travel, go back to their home country, which means they have re-availed themselves in terms of section 5A, or conditions that led them to come to the South Africa and receive the refugee status have ceased, and they can no longer refuse protection of their own countries. And then after withdrawal of the refugee status, the person must be treated as an illegal foreigner in terms of section 32 of the Immigration Act, meaning this person must be deported. Thank you. Next slide. Here we're just showing the overview of the composition of the Standing Committee for Refugee Affairs. This is our structure in the office. In the office, we have 12 admin support staff, including the office manager. And then at the moment, we have 5 SCRA members. We are in a process of employing 4 extra SCRA members. Thank you. Next slide. This is the work that we have done in the year 2020 from January to December 2020. This is certification. On the first block, it will show the months, and then the second block, it will show the cases that we have considered. I'll just go to the total. In the year 2020, we considered 1,356 applications for certification. And then the coming block, we granted certification to 578 people. Yeah. And then certification considered pending finalization. In this block, we're talking about, we have the files were presented to us. The files had all the information, but while we were going through the files, we realized that the extra information that we want, like for instance, if a person has traveled with passport to another country, not his own country, we would want to find out what happened, where were you going, what were you going to do, copies of the passport or marriage certificate. If this person saying, I'm including somebody whom he says is the wife, but was not declared when he applied for refugee status. And the following is certification not granted and status not withdrawn. We did 90 last year. And then this is a situation where, like for instance, in a particular country, there's change of administration. I can just give an example of Burundi. There's a new president who comes and then maybe promise peace and whatever the case may be. But then we want to see if the peace that is promised will continue, if there will be durable solutions. So we can say to the refugee, we are not going to give you a certification because we see there is positive change in your country. At the same time, at this time, we are not withdrawing. Probably we give you a period of a year so that we can check if ever there are changes or if ever the peace is progressive. And then certification not granted and status withdrawn. We have withdrawn 146 refugee statuses emanating from application for section 27C. Next slide. This is breakdown of section 36 statistics. This is withdrawals. In this also it shows according to the month, but it says in total, we considered 777 cases of withdrawals. On block number 2 and 3, this shows that these withdrawals emanated from the refugee reception offices. That is where they send submissions to SCRA to say, kindly withdraw the refugee status of the following people based on whatever reasons they would have indicated. Most of them is those who have traveled back to their own country. So they, out of that, we recommended for withdrawal 94. And then on those 94, the SCRA now is busy with the intention to withdraw, so that when the applicants come back, when the RROs open, they will be served with the notices, with the letters of intention to withdraw. And then 41, we did not recommend. We said, okay, these people, they still need protection. These ones are not the ones that traveled back to their own countries. And then the last block, it talks of voluntary section 36 withdrawals. These are refugees who have been in a country for some years. Then they come to SCRA to say, we thank you. You have, the country has given us protection, but now we want to go back home because things have changed. There is peace in our country. And we have withdrawn 642 in the year 2020. And the majority of these ones are from Ethiopia. Next slide. Okay, litigation matters are prioritized by the SCRA. Okay, we will note litigation starts from the letters of demand until we are taken to court. So on the first block is litigation on section 24.3b, which is review of refugee status determination officers of the asylum seekers who have failed. So after they have failed to get refugee status, or let me just say don't qualify, then the SCRA has given a final rejection. When they are supposed to go home, they decide now they want to institute a judicial review. And let me say that most of these cases, they make frivolous applications because there's no matter in them. Like for instance, they would say there was no interpreter, and you find that this person has a degree, let's say a degree in law. I'm just giving an example. A degree in law is from Kenya. The medium of instruction is English. So there's no way in which this person can say, I don't understand English. Some of them, you find that they have written the claims themselves. So we received 2,473 for those cases. And in section 27C, this is the certifications I've been talking about before. We received 24 in the year 2020. And I must admit that majority of these 24, they were not actually challenging the decision of the standing committee. They were compelling the standing committee to make decision. And this was based on the fact that since we were working as a quorum, it was difficult to deal with all these matters. But thanks, since 2020, we are able to function as an individual. And then on section 36, these are the cases where we have already withdrawn the refugee statuses, and they have taken the decision of the standing committee to court for judicial review. And I must also indicate that some of these matters, they don't have matter. I can give an example now that we had. It's a woman from Zimbabwe. She came to South Africa. She got a refugee status. She keeps her Zimbabwean passport. She just come to South Africa and have a stay and go to other countries to work there and just come to South Africa on holiday. So we decided to check all their movement control, all their movements using the MCS. We found that this woman had been traveling, and then we withdrew the refugee status. Then letters of demand, we received 100, we were served with 1549 in the year 2020. But what we are doing now, we make sure that as soon as we receive a letter of demand, we attend to it quickly so that it mustn't go to the notice of motion. So in total, we had 49. Next slide. This is about Paint City and the Wingfield. I think Parliament already have this. We have attended to Section 24-112 cases, and then we are still to attend to 211 cases. Next slide, please. The backlog that SCRA has, as indicated there, at the RRO, active Section 24(3)(b), these are asylum seekers. We have written according to the RRO, but total we have 28,549. Okay, the cases that SCRA has reviewed at the RRO in the year 2020, how many cases have we reviewed? It's indicated according to the Refugee Reception Office, but I'll just say, start from the end. The grand total, SCRA has attended or reviewed 15,735 cases, failed asylum seekers. And then out of those, we upheld 11,788, and most of these ones are the Ethiopians. So these ones this is final rejection, and they are to be deported. And then we set aside 2,637, meaning here we did not agree with the decision of the RSDO. So we set their decision aside. Like for instance, you would find, okay, this case was supposed to be unfounded and not manifestly unfounded or fraudulent. So it was supposed to go to the RAA, but it came to the standing committee. Then referred back, we had 1,310. This referred back, it's not necessarily that we disagree with the decision of the RSDO, it's that it means that maybe certain procedures they didn't follow, or maybe the applicant himself did not sign the PAJA notice notifying them of their rights. Next slide, please. Okay, here we just showing our backlog on section 27C application, even though we started from long time ago, but at the end we've got 2020 to say. In 2020 we received new cases. It was only 890, and then we considered 1,356, and then it shows a backlog only of last year, which is 466, but backlog starting from other years, it is 6,231. Next slide. SCRA's action plan. SCRA has the following action plan to eradicate the backlog. Authority has been granted for the appointment of 4 additional SCRA members for a duration of 24 months. 1 member will be placed in the Cape Town Refugee Reception Office servicing Port Elizabeth and Port Elizabeth as well. So this person has already been appointed, started working on the 1st of February. 1 member to be placed in Durban, RRO. This one is not yet placed, will be interviewed before the end of March. And then 2 members are to be placed at the Desmond Tutu Refugee Reception Office. 1 is appointed, and then 1 still to be appointed and will be interviewed in March. And then 2 vacant posts are in the process of being filled for the duration of 5 years with members stationed at the RRO office in Pretoria. So these ones also will be interviewed now in March. And let me just say, SCRA is happy to have members like this, because all along we were 3, but now SCRA is going to have 9 members. That is a positive development. Thank you so much. And with the implementation of the new Amendment Act, SCRA is no longer required to function as a quorum as indicated before. And this means that SCRA will be able to attend to a greater number of backlog matters. And with the recommended backlog structure, the backlog should at least last for 24 months with the possibility of extending it with a further 12 months. Next slide. Next slide. Challenges that we had in 2020. This one is obvious. The COVID-19 restriction, SCRA and refugee reception offices were not fully functional with staff operating at rotational basis. The administrative component of SCRA at its head office, which is Pretoria, needs to be fully capacitated to support the workload of the review by the SCRA. This we are looking, it's forward looking because we're going to have 9 SCRA members instead of 3. So we need support to assist in preparation for the files. SCRA supported the RRO must be capacitated to provide support to SCRA members deployed at each RRO. So even at the RROs, we will need support, people who will be dedicated to deal only with the SCRA work, to report to SCRA, to go according to the timetable of SCRA. Thank you. And then SCRA file content must be available to review applications. This was only a challenge because staff at the RROs were working on rotational basis. So you find that the one who is supporting you, who is SCRA support, maybe will come after every second day. But we have already discussed with the RRO and they are assisting us so much. And SCRA need to be proactive, need to have proactive review of applications to reduce litigation. We have started, like for instance, I explained in the previous slide that once we receive a letter of demand, we attend to communicating with the attorneys and to tell them the progress, to update them on the progress. And over and above that, before we even get letters of demand, we attend to cases. Then upgrade of SCRA IT infrastructure. This is a problem, but SCRA has already communicated with the Home Affairs and SCRA's network. It's approved for upgrade and we are awaiting delivery of computers and also the networks. Then physical space at SCRA, physical space available for required personnel will not be conducive to comply with the current COVID-19 restrictions. Officers, they work on rotational basis to mitigate risk and comply to social distancing. But SCRA members operate at full capacity as each has its own office. So yes, SCRA members from the 1st of June 2020, we've been working every day from Monday to Friday. Only our support staff are rotating. SCRA has requested installation of desk protective screens for DHA, from DHA. So we're going to use our boardrooms, then we have this protective screen as soon as we get new members and new officials from the Home Affairs. Next slide. Positive aspects. One of the positive aspects, Minister approved the appointment of 6 SCRA members, as indicated before, 4 on 2-year contract with 2 members already appointed, 2 on 5-year contract. They will be appointed very soon. Then during the lockdown, SCRA used that opportunity to attend to the backlog. SCRA reviewed 15,735 Section 24(3)(b) cases. SCRA managed to audit its whole registry, allowing the SCRA to know precisely the status of each application for certification. So in 2020, there was a time when we said in our office, the admin support staff, they must audit the whole registry. That is the time when we were busy at the Refugee Reception Center attending to those 15,735 matters. And then the last point is the SCRA continued eradicating the backlog despite human resource challenges posed during COVID-19. Next slide. Thank you so much. Inkomo, Rikolibuwa. Thank you very much. That will be the end of my presentation.
Sekorivua, can we take the next presentation?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister. Good morning, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Advocate Bongo, and other honorable committee members. Good morning also to our DG, Mr. Tommy Mafodu, and DDG, Mr. McKay. I'm Advocate Nigel Holmes, the Chairperson of the Refugee Appeals Authority of South Africa. And I'm going to be presenting our yearly statistics and challenges and findings, as well as updating the Portfolio Committee on the Backlog Project and the steps going forward in terms of the Backlog Project. That's our contents page. We will deal with some of the legislative obligations and some of the changes that we had to make to be able to resolve our backlog. The next slide. So the Refugee Appeals Authority is going to report on its findings for the financial year 2019-2020. In essence, we're dealing with the statistics for 2020 specifically to indicate what was done in 2020. The presentation will cover all of the aspects around the current issues for the Refugee Appeals Authority, as well as immediate plans. In particular, we will deal with the backlog plan, as many of the members of the committee would have heard about. Next slide. So our legislative mandate ultimately is to deal with appeal cases that comes from the Department of Home Affairs, the Asylum Seeker Management. The RSDO makes a decision, and those matters are then appealed. Those appeals come to us, and our mandate is to deal with those appeals efficiently, effectively, and in an unbiased manner in terms of the Act. So ultimately, we operate as an independent tribunal, which is dealing with international and domestic obligations. And I speak to those obligations on the next slide. But ultimately, the Refugee Appeals Board, as it was known before, became the Refugee Appeals Authority in January 2020, when the new legislation was promulgated. And currently, we have a staffing component of myself, the chairperson, 2 members, one based in Pretoria and one based in Cape Town, and 11 supporting staff assisting us with our administrative staffing requirements around the country. All the members are appointed currently in a statutory limited duration contract of 5 years, and I will explain a little bit how that has changed currently in the new legislation. Next slide. So these are international obligations, and it's slightly intricate because it deals with all our international obligations that we as a country have signed, including the Universal Declaration, the United Nations Convention relating to status of refugees, the protocol to that convention. We also have an agreement between UNHCR and South Africa that we concluded in 1993 that we comply with. There's also the Convention against torture and other cruel and inhuman and degrading treatment, as well as the Convention on the Rights of the Child and other international treaties that we have to apply when we are determining refugee status. We also have regional obligations, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, as well as the AOU Convention on governing the specific aspects of refugee problems in Africa, and that was published in 1969. These are the international obligations. Our domestic obligations includes the Constitution, the Refugees Act, the Immigration Act as it relates to our function, as well as the Promotion of Administration of Justice Act and the Promotion of Access to Information Act. These are the legislative requirements that we need to comply with. This is our specific backlog or statistics as it stands currently. We have about 124,000 active cases. What that means is that those individuals are coming to the refugee centers and renewing their permit on a regular basis. And then we have 29,967 inactive cases. And those are individuals that are no longer coming to the refugee reception center to extend their permit, but yet they are still in the system because we need to find out where they are and finalize their matter. So in total, the Refugee Appeals Authority is sitting with 153 cases, 153,967 cases, which the three of us have tried to manage and decide. And obviously, it's a mammoth task and compounded by the quorum requirements. So the three of us would travel around the country to try and alleviate this backlog. However, we had to sit together as one for each case. So this caused a huge backlog over the years. And I will illustrate how this backlog accumulated over the years by showing you the next couple of slides. The next one. So this is the amount of cases that came into the Refugee Reception Center from 2008 to 2019. It shows a gradual increase in 2009, just before the World Cup. And then after the World Cup, it reduced until it reduced exponentially in 2019. But I want to show this slide with the next slide so that we can see what caused and how the numbers indicate how the backlog grew over the years. The next slide. So from that slide, you can see, for example, in the first column, in 2010, we had 17,000 applicants that came into the country at that point. And the percentage of those that are approved would be anything from 80 to 90%. So all of those that are not approved then lodge an appeal. And in 2019, we were able to only deal with 1,000 of those appeals. So that already in itself, just the operations, resulted in the increase of the backlog. The next year, the same amount of people, 17,000, we were only able to deal with 4,000. Even though in the later years from 2017, we were able to deal with more people at the same time, while applicants became less, we were still not able to deal with the total backlog. And there were many reasons for that I will speak to in the next slide. So these are our decisions, basically the statistics from 2010 to 2020 that indicates the work that we have done. We do condemnations, which is a process where a person is late and we decide on that matter. When we say a matter is dismissed, that's the ultimate decisions that each member can make together with the condemnations. And then those that were upheld, in other words, those people that received refugee status over the years, with other words, they made an appeal, they were rejected by the RSDO, the Refugee Status Determination Officer. They made an appeal to us and we handled the matter. And then, so those that are dismissed are those that we confirm the rejection, and those that were upheld were those where we awarded refugee status. Some, when we say no-show, those are still decisions that we had to finalize. So we scheduled a hearing, but the appellant doesn't come to the hearing, and so we finalize it on the paper. And as you can see, one of the most interesting statistics is that our cancellations are increases exponentially from 2017, whereas from 2010 to 2016, it was reasonably under 100. It's now beyond 2,000, in fact, beyond 3,000 over the last 2 years. The next slide, please. So these are some of the contributing factors that contributed to why we are in the situation at the moment with this huge backlog. The first, obviously, is that we have a lack of capacity. It's only the three of us, and the three of us had to sit together as a single member to decide each case. We also didn't have financial support. We all know the department had limited funding to fund the capacity needs. We also struggled with communicating with appellants. Unlike other courts, if you communicate with a person that's got a case, you send them a letter or you send them an SMS to remind them to come. We, as the Refugee Appeals Authority, don't have that ability. We have to wait until the client comes to the center to renew their permit so that we can then see the client and serve them with a notice. And we might miss clients for years because of that fact. That's one of the things that we have changed, but I'll speak to that a bit later. We also had a bit of poor quality decisions because the RROs and the RSDOs maybe didn't collect enough information, like, for example, the person's home address, where they are actually coming from. So, for example, they would say, I come from the DRC. Now, this is a problem for us because we know some parts of the DRC is in conflict, but not all of it. So if you come from Kinshasa, it might be that you don't have a claim, whereas if you come from the east, you might have a claim. So that causes a little bit of challenges for us because you now have to feed into that information as a first instance body, whereas we're actually acting as an appeal body. Also, the same with the RSDO process. There was a little bit of capacity growth within the RSDO, so that meant that we received more decisions over that year. In 2016, in fact, we lost so many members, including the chairperson, that there was only 2 members left. And because of the quorum requirement, we had to be 3, the chairperson and 2 members. And so when the chairperson was no longer there, we couldn't operate. It was so bad in terms of that requirement. And that also increased the backlog. We also have inherited cases from the old members that left. They heard matters, but then they didn't finalize the matters. And then either the contract came to an end, or the contract, or they resigned. And then the current members had to inherit those decisions, which also caused a little bit of a backlog. I speak there a little bit about the quorum requirements. The case is the Haririmana judgment. It's Haririmana versus the Refugee Appeals Board. And it was decided in 2016, exactly the same time that the Refugee Appeals Board also were only 2 members. In any event, it couldn't operate. But from that point, we then had to operate as a quorum. And if I may just explain the problem, as my colleague explained, even if you appointed 20 members at the time, you would have had to deal with a single case as 11 members to form a quorum. And so it wouldn't have even helped if we actually increased our numbers for the members, because this requirement would have nullified any kind of capacity increase. We also have a requirement now that was decided recently in 2019. It's called the FNM judgment. It's FNM versus the Refugee Appeals Board. In this judgment, because the court doesn't really understand how refugee processes work, they have decided that even if we find objective information, like country information published by Lawyers for Human Rights or Human Rights Watch, which is objective information, we still have to present it to the appellant. But to be able to do that, you need to then wait for that appellant to come back to renew their permit. And so it means that you can't finalize a case within a year because you are waiting for the appellant to come. So other factors are that we didn't have any research capacity, and we are mandated by the courts outside of our budget as well as our plans. So if you plan to conduct hearings, the court will say, no, you have to now go to Musina and conduct hearings there, and we want you to decide the matter within the next 30 days. So all our operations and plans then stop, and we have to attend to court matters. And as you know, each court in the provinces makes decisions that are pending or that is against us, and therefore we constantly have to try and comply with court orders outside of our normal process. Just the three of us, literally having to travel to each of the provinces based on these court orders. In total, we currently have 1,300 pending litigation cases. So just to give you an idea, 1,300 cases then becomes the priority cases because the courts mandate us to deal with those cases immediately. The next slide. So I start off with a bit of statistics of each refugee reception center so that you can see the work that was done and how the pandemic has influenced our work. You'll see from, for example, in Desmond Tutu, January, February until March, we have over 100 cases that we deal with. After the lockdown, strict lockdown, the end of March and April, there's hardly any cases. We did deal with court orders even on a home basis, and where there were urgent matters, we tried to conduct virtual hearings. So you'll see there are still activity, but it was much more limited because of the lockdown. After September, we increased the activity again. You'll see we moved to over 200 cases again in October, November, December. Next slide, please. So the same pattern can be seen in each reception center. In total, we dealt with 149 cases in Messina. It's a very complex refugee reception center because it sits at the border next to Beitbridge. So most clients actually come through there and then move from there to other provinces. But you will see that the numbers are much lower than compared to the other reception centers because they skip that center and then, for example, go to PE, Cape Town, etc. Next slide, please. That's for Durban. You'll see the numbers are similar, around 60, 50 until March, until lockdown, and we picked up a little bit later in August again, finalizing matters in that area. Next slide. Cape Town, as well, as you know, the main project we were busy with in Cape Town is the protesters that we are trying to finalize there at the moment. So we have completed 108 cases in total so far, and we are way past that number at this stage. We are still, all of our resources are invested into completing that project as soon as possible. Next slide, please. So this is our new name, Refugee Reception Center. I'm going to attempt to say the name of Beja. And the Refugee Reception Center, we have similar numbers that you can see. We are busy from January to March and then pick up again in September. There are no members actually at these centers. The only member that we have is in Cape Town. There's a single member there. So when we conduct processes in these reception centers, we normally have to travel there, all three of us, and try and conduct our hearings there and then try and finalize it as soon as possible. Next slide. So these were our challenges over the period. We were severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The refugee reception centers closed down. We operate within the centers. So we had to move our operations slightly out of it where we could by conducting virtual hearings, etc. But the impact because of the closure of the reception centers It can be seen in our numbers. We also had to have a reduction in our budget. As you know, the department as a whole had a huge reduction in its budget, and this also affected us. In fact, we're sitting now in February without any budget to operate. Also, we have, as I said earlier, dedicated all our resources now to the Cape Town protesters matters. So I'm now going to, that's part of our statistics and where we are at the moment. And I'll quickly talk about some of the solutions and including the backlog plan. As you can see, our solutions included an increase of our allocated budget for 2021 from the department. We will commence with the Backlog Project in March 2020. We have already installed a case management system that will manage that project centrally. We have appointed additional capacity, over 36 members and 36 staff to assist us with the project. We have a new streamlined refugee status determination process. In fact, it is so well received that we have now requests from other countries through the UNHCR to see what we are doing, and because most countries in the world are having the same problems as us when it comes to finalizing refugee applications. And so our new streamlining processes where we profile individuals and we do pre-hearing work is now something of international recognition. We also drafted a new practice note for virtual hearings so that we can move away from having to interact with all appellants all the time, and we could go onto a virtual platform and conduct our processes. We've also developed a new type of electronic communication strategy. Remember, one of the challenges in the past was to communicate with the appellants, to tell them about what our processes are and when they should come. And we now have included in our legislation the ability to communicate with asylum seekers directly by using SMS, emails, etc., to serve them directly. The same as what other tribunals work in South Africa. The next slide. So this is a part of the development so far. It's been a couple of years of development in trying to get all the parties involved and on board with the project and what needs to happen. It started off with a bilateral agreement in Geneva at the time, in 2019, where the deputy minister at that point agreed with the head of the UNHCR to try and assist us to resolve the backlog. After that, two committees were established, an advisory group, which I am part of, which includes Asylum Seeker Management, Refugee Appeals Authority, as well as UNHCR, and we sit on these committees to try and iron out any of the challenges that needed to be ironed out so that we can finalize the agreement. It then went to, we also have an operations committee. We have now appointed a project manager, and that project manager will run with the logistics in terms of the project. After the bilateral agreement, a consultant was appointed. Her name is Deborah Morris. She then conducted research within the department and submitted a report on 1 May, setting out a backlog project plan. And ultimately, she issued it in August 2019. This plan was then presented to the department, including the executive as well as the Honourable Minister, to approve. It also had to go to DIRCO because it's an international agreement, and the Department of Justice to just verify that everything within the agreement is compliant. And ultimately, it was approved by our president on 21 February 2021. All approvals are now ready for us to sign this partnership agreement, which will happen next week, or I understand, or early in March, between the Honourable Minister as well as the head of the South African unit for the UNHCR, Mr. Leonard Zulu, that will sign this momentous agreement into to start the project officially. Next slide. So these were some of the mistakes we had in the past. We did start backlog projects. I'm not going to go into details. It was started in 2000 as well as 2005, but there were never any buy-in from all the parties. You needed an agreement between, for example, UNHCR and the department in order to make sure who's responsible for what. And the reason we failed in the past is because there were no such agreement in place. Next slide. So these are the pre-steps we had to take in order for us to be able to fight the backlog efficiently. Firstly, we had to change our persona because we were known as the Refugee Appeals Board, but in fact, we were not a board. There were only 3 of us. And in fact, we were operating as one person. So the impression the name gave was that there was a board of members sitting and deciding matters, which was not the case. So we had to change our name and create a new persona. So now we are known as the Refugee Appeals Authority of South Africa. We also had to change the type of contracts that we can sign. In the past, it was only 5-year contracts that could be signed. So if you conducted any projects, you had to appoint members for 5 years. So it made it incompatible with conducting a project. So now we can appoint members for any given number of years, dependent on what we need and how many people we need for the project. We also changed the situation on the quorum to allow the chairperson, like any other tribunal in the world, to decide how many members must deal with an appeal. Instead of sitting as a quorum, we can now decide based on the severity of the case, how many members can attend to it. But it will never be the same scenario as what it was in the past with the quorum requirement. We also included aspects on condonation in the legislation, and we input a very important provision in the legislation, the ability for us to make decisions on paper. Because some matters are so straightforward. Some of the standing committee members, it's straightforward matters where they can decide the matter on paper, but we never had the power to do that. We had to have a hearing and then decide a matter, and some matters were so straightforward that it can actually be decided on paper. So we included that mandate within the legislation as well. We also reduced the number or the time from getting a rejection letter from the asylum seeker management and lodging your appeal, so that you have now 10 days to do that. But the way we tried to balance that limitation was to allow appellants now to submit their appeal electronically. It also reduces the amount of people that needs to go to the Refugee Reception Center, and it goes together with our policy on the war on queues. This is also a very important aspect from moving from a space where we were only created backlogs by having manually people submitting their appeal forms to a space where we can do it online. And fortuitously, we're now in the pandemic and it actually suits the process now much better. We also have the power to refer matters back to the RSDO, which we didn't have in the past, which also helps us to try and finalize matters quickly. Next slide. So these are some of the other operational steps that we had to take. When I arrived in 2017, we had to redo the process, the way we were conducting hearings. So we changed the format of the hearings. We also introduced recordings in our hearings so that we can protect the member and protect the process. So if anybody goes on review to a court, we would have an exact reflection of what actually happened during the processes. And this has ultimately decreased our litigation exponentially, because people now know that we have a recording of what happened during the process, and they don't go to court because there's evidence clearly of what they said, whereas that wasn't there in the past. So we also had to redraft the decisions, because a lot of complaints came on how did we come to the conclusion? But it was because we never had the legal obligations within our decisions. So now we have those in the decision. We also, I spoke about the streamlining and profiling processes that we now implement. We have also published and redrafted our rules and new practice notes so that we can deal with those that are infirm, destitute, and children, especially mentally fragile people that also seem to come to our process, but we don't have a practice on how to deal with them. So we created a practice note in terms of that, and we have a new practice note dealing with virtual hearings. Most importantly, we also drafted and created a code of conduct for members, so that that situation where decisions are inherited by the current members don't happen again. So members will be liable for their work. They will be kept liable. There will be management of the performance because they have now signed this code of conduct. We've also installed, like I said before, a server and a case management system to deal with the backlog better centrally, as well as having a counter strategic litigation unit. Now, what that refers to is we have strategic litigation against the department. There are organizations out there that are taking the department to court on a regular basis, and they use it to change policy strategically. So we had to create a plan to deal with that strategy. And we have now started meeting with the various state attorneys to try and explain to them our role, what we're doing, and to try and limit the litigation. We developed SOPs in terms of different types of decisions, and we appointed the project manager for the project, Ms. Kelebogile Magabo, who's joined us from the beginning of the year. Next slide. So this is just a breakdown. I apologize for the quality. I hope everybody can see. This is a breakdown of the financial analysis for the project. There's a total of 146 million Rand estimated that the project will need in terms of capacity. And this basically breaks down all the requirements that would be necessary to resolve the backlog over a 4-year period. So if we do not have the money or we appoint less people, obviously the period will be a little bit longer. So this sets out the amount of people that needs to be appointed for us to resolve the project within 4 years. And the next slide just gives a little bit more detail in terms of each department's responsibilities, or each the responsibility of the department as well as that of UNHCR. The department will appoint the administrative capacity. In other words, those individuals that support the members to finalize decisions. And we have estimated that the amount would be around 39 million for those officials. What will happen is they will be internally moved so that we can try and cut costs of getting new people on board. As we know, funding is a bit of a problem, as well as office equipment of about 3.3 million, depending on the budget. So this is in terms of the project, what the department will support the project with. The next slide, please. And these are just a little bit more detail on that, on the particular cost for each position. We can go past the slide. Next one. So this is the UNHCR's support for the project. They agreed to pay the salaries of the 36 new members, totaling 107 million Rand. They've also agreed to paying for the IT requirements of those members. So with other words, laptops, the licenses that goes on there, a common hard drive, etc., to assist them with the operational tools. They're also going to appoint a dedicated person, what we call a project coordinator. We have a project manager that's been appointed and a project coordinator that will be appointed by UNHCR, so that person coordinates all the parties involved, and we have a person that manages that. We'll have the provision of training and assistance from UNHCR to train the new members over a 6-month period when I talk to the phases a bit later, and we will deal with that in detail. So that's the support from UNHCR. Next slide. So this is just a little bit, as there's about 3 slides that speaks a little bit about the details of the project, and I know I've run out of time, so I'm going to try and go through it quickly, if I may. During the first phase, we are basically going to get everything in order for the project to run. With other words, we need to go to the centers and get those files. We need to appoint the members. We need to start auditing the files so that it gets ready for those members. So our first phase will be a phase where we get everything ready, so to say, a getting ready phase. And during this phase, myself and the 2 older members will draft what we call group or leading decisions to assist the new members so that they are able to hit the ground running, so to say. The next slide. So this is also a little bit more detail about the process. We're going to start with what we call the heritage files. It's merely files older than 10 years or between 8 and 10 years old and older. We start with those files, and we're going to start with at the new Babega Refugee Reception Center. And
your time.
Basically, yes. Mr. Chair, I can probably leave the presentation at this point. The next couple of slides merely gives more detail on the timelines, and if we go right to the end, I'm merely talking to our outreach and communication strategies within the project and the streamlining of the project. So I could conclude there if there's any questions from the committee.
Thank you. I'm going to give over to members. Members? I'll start with Honorable Mgcine. Number 2, Honorable Dezel. Number 3, Honorable Asnat. Number 4, Honorable Angel. 5, Honorable Pile.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. I don't know why you always start with me, because I'm really getting ambushed all the time. Maybe I must be given a chance that, you know, I must just be fast because I'm getting disorganized all the time. No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Chairperson. You know, every time when we get to this.
Why do you get, Honorable Mgcine, why do you get disorganized when the presentation was sent on time?
No, not really. You know, the disorganized. There's a following trend that the member of the EFF must always start so that maybe in the longer run it can be disorganized. You know, so
no,
I don't know.
There's no intention whatsoever to disorganize you. It's just a sequence of the hands I see.
All right, Chairperson. No problem.
Sure.
No, Chair, every time we get to a presentation of this nature, talking about, you know, refugees, sometimes, you know, it always reminds us, it actually reminds me in terms of who are we, and then, you know, how are we being called, you know. It's a very painful thing, you know, calling yourself that you are a refugee in your own continent, you know, Africa. Maybe it's even maybe in the international scene, we can be called, you know, like the refugees and all of that. So it always reminds me that, you know, I have to remind myself that, you know, we are Africans in whatever it is, because if Africans cannot come to South Africa, where must they go? Because they are not wanted in the international space. We've seen when they were crossing the rivers going to Europe, how were they being treated? We know our brothers, how are they being treated in the diaspora? How are they being treated? It's very, very sad. You know, every time when I listen to presentation this way, where our brothers needs to come to our country for economic reasons, because their countries are not doing very well. There's wars that's going on. Their GDP is very low. There's a lack of unemployment and all of that. Now, so when they come to their brothers in South Africa, they are treated like strangers. But in any case, we are here now. So, Chairperson, the inefficiencies in the SCRA, and I think also in these appeals, it makes, we need to look at this thing very carefully. It makes our African brothers to be harassed by the authorities. And I want to put it to actually them that they are slow-paced of dealing with these issues, because the laws of the country now wants you to have an asylum and all of that. Their inefficiencies, it makes our people to be abused by the local police. Now, we had just had a presentation from the refugee camp there in actually Cape Town, and we asked a question, and I think also Minister, you know, he supported that. What happens when the disaster management ends? What is going to happen after that? Because I think that these people are still applying for asylum. Now, if the process of asylum application is taking too long, what is going to happen when that disaster management finishes? So is there any prioritization of those people to make sure that they receive their asylum things? Another one is to, there's a backlog. Maybe can the appeals maybe clarify this 124,000? What does it mean that these are the people who are seeking asylum, or is the people that have been granted asylum but they have not been approved? What does it mean, this a backlog? And then can there be a clarification in terms of granting a person asylum? What data do you use? What information is used? I mean, for a particular country, for example, you look probably, let's say, to the economic situation in that country. And then when you say that you look at the economic situation in that country, which is dire, what indicators do you use? Do you use the GDP? You use unemployment, instability, government? What do you use? Do you always current in terms of which countries are having problems and all of that? So what criterion and from where there's a reference, what data do you use? Or maybe do you feel maybe sometimes you use your feelings that, no, maybe Ethiopia, it is stable and it's okay now. People can actually go back. So can the presenters clarify what data are they using to grant asylum, you know, to the people? And also, do you have any applications coming from international countries, Western countries like UK, maybe Eastern countries, maybe China or something like that? Are there any people coming from maybe Greek or Portuguese who are coming to South Africa and seek asylum? And how many are those people? Or is it only the people from the African continent who are applying for those things there? And I wanted to check, Chairperson, in terms of the migration, refugees and all of that. Maybe I might have missed it a little bit. I wanted to check. I think there was a slide. Maybe the presenters can clarify it for me. What is the migration of the people? I mean, total migration, maybe after 1994 till now, from the African countries coming into South Africa. What is that? The percentage? Does that Have they been seeing a lot of people coming this side? And I think I've seen also that there's some kind of a decrease somehow. So how many people have been seeking asylums after 1994 when we got our freedom, coming from Africa to actually here? Are there so many people of our brothers from our countries in South Africa to a point where you can have people like those people of put South African first, you know, people advocating for actually that? I want to check the number. Is it so much that you have people now calling us put South Africa first? I wanted to look into those numbers and see this migration of the people that are coming from the other countries. Are there so many that people will be able now to say, no, people are coming from Africa and taking our jobs? So can maybe the presenters maybe highlight on that? I think that maybe Chair, if we can maybe give in some follow-up questions, maybe I'll ask some other questions. No, thank you very much. Those are my inputs for now. Thank you.
Honorable Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and welcome back to you. I unfortunately have got some connection issues, so I hope you can hear me clearly. I want to start off by saying that I think it's quite a sad state of affairs that we've been expecting these two bodies to do the very important work that they have to perform in terms of their legislative mandate, yet they have been asked to do so without the basics, without human capacity, without tools of trade, without basic resources. And what's even worse is that nobody sought to intervene up until now, not the previous minister, not the previous portfolio committee. And I think it's quite a depressing state of affairs because, you know, so many people have been affected by the asylum seeker system collapsing to the extent that it have. But then again, I also want to say that, you know, we must welcome the partnership with the UNHCR, and the fact that there's been positive changes in law, you know, does mean that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. But I'd like to ask a few clarity-seeking questions. In terms of the SCRA presentation, you know, they deal with the Section 27C applications and with the Section 36 with applications, etc. It then says that on slide 7, it says application to be considered refugees indefinitely, certification not granted and status withdrawn. And it then lists that it was 146 had their refugee status withdrawn. I would like to know which citizens of which countries in the main no longer enjoy refugee protection. I think we were given some examples, but maybe just a snapshot of the nationalities. For example, you know, is it people from Bangladeshi origin, from Rwandan origin that no longer qualify for refugee status? There's also a slide that says after withdrawal of the refugee status, the person must be treated as an illegal foreigner in terms of Section 32 of the Immigration Act. And then if you look at the slides in terms of the number of voluntary withdrawals, rejections, you know, cases upheld, etc., it comes to about 12,610 people that were denied the refugee status, or, you know, etc. Does this mean that 12,610 people have been deported in the last year, in 2020? Because I would like to know whether the department keeps a record or a tracking mechanism to ensure that all those who had their status withdrawn, voluntary or not, or rejected, do exit the country. Because you know, ideally I would like to see a slide that indicates not only the work done in finalizing the cases, but the logical follow through. In other way, so many final rejections and no intent to litigate, so many are still active in the country and so many have exited. Otherwise, I feel we do the work of the assessments and all this important work, but there's no tracking mechanisms to ensure that people do actually leave, which then defeats the objective of the work. In terms of litigation, both to SCRA and to RAASA, I would like to know what is the cost of litigation to yourselves and the department over the last, in 2020. And then SCRA also mentioned the fact that they needed to be fully capacitated in terms of upgrades to the IT systems. And I wanted to know timeframes of these. And also there was a mention that file contents must be available when applications are reviewed. And I wanted to know whether this was not available in the past. File contents of cases, I assume, are very important. Then to RAASA, I think it's quite a depressing state of affairs that they've been expected to do work. I actually thought the whole time I was speaking about 4 staff members, but now to hear that they only had 3 staff members, I think is quite shocking. But now, when we speak about the 124 cases that are currently active, I would like to know on average, how long have these cases been active for? So has it been 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years on average, an average length of being active? And I'm asking this because as I've said to the committee before, I've got people who've approached me in the past. It's individuals who run cell phone shops, and they are Pakistani and Bangladeshi nationals who have admitted to not being legitimate refugees, but they are in possession of the Section 22 permits, which they've been able to review or renew for more than 10 years. And in the meantime, for me, it's concerning because these individuals are, of course, their status is never rejected or denied. And I know it's part of the backlog, but in essence, then, they've been able to use state services without contributing to VAT or tax. And I think in my view, this also refers to what the AG said, that there's been an increase in the abuse of the asylum seeker system. I would like to know, I found it quite baffling that we couldn't in the past communicate with applicants or appellants via email or SMS. Why was this not the case? I know it's now in place, but surely I don't understand why we couldn't communicate with people via SMS and had to wait for them to present themselves to refugee reception officers, which, like the presenter said, could take many, many years for people to come back to the reception offices. So why was that not the case? I would like to also know, last year in its presentation to us, the AG said that the department did not know how many of the 946,000 inactive Section 22 applicants were still in the country. And now there was a slide saying that we've only got 29,967 inactive Section 22 applicants. So are we saying that between 2017 and now, we've deported 916,000 asylum seekers? And if this is the case, that's quite an impressive number, or am I simply misreading the stats? If I can just get clarity on that. The dramatic drop in asylum seekers presenting themselves to the refugee offices, I wanted to know, why do you think this is the case? Is it simply that people are entering the country and not presenting themselves to the offices, or what would we attribute that drop to? Then on slide 10, RAASA said, one of the reasons it has been struggling is because of the lack of case management system. And I would wanted to know, how did we finalize cases before if we didn't have a case management system? Are we still, and there's also a mention of now wanting to digitize files for auditing and streaming purposes. So does this mean we're still working on a manual or a paper system? And lastly, there was some mention there that poor quality decisions from the refugee status determination officer or officers. And I would like to know, what training qualifications do these officers have? Because if that was a problem at the start, we should have beefed up capacity there, or should have changed those individuals. And then maybe this is a similar question to what the Honourable Mgini said. You mentioned there no research capacity as it relates to the presentation of objective country of origin information. So if you didn't have the information to your disposal about, for example, the situation in Bangladesh or Pakistan or Rwanda, how did you make your decisions if you didn't have the requisite information at hand? Yeah, Chairperson, I think finally, I would like to ask if in the next 4 years you are able to clear the backlog, there might be a massive deportation project. And do you have the resources and plans in place for this? Because as we know, you've only got a few MOUs with different countries to recover these deportation costs. And I'm actually not sure whether you've recovered funds from any of these countries as yet. And I will leave it at that for now. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Koche. Honorable Asnat? Honorable Malikwa?
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me start by appreciating the presentation made by two bodies, Chairperson. I think most of the question has been covered by by Honorable Lizelle, but I have only one question on the.
I am a comrade, don't worry.
Sorry.
I said you can call me comrade, it's fine.
I have only one question on the presentation by SCRA. That they presented that they have reviewed almost 15,735 cases under Section 24(3)(b). I just wanted to check, Chairperson, on how many cases that have been finally rejected, or cases that have been set aside, or cases that have been referred back on this total number of 15,735. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Daniele.
Thank you, Chairperson, and to the Minister, the Deputy, and everyone in the meeting.
Where are you,
We
Honorable?
welcome the presentations that are in. I'm in Acacia. Can you hear me?
Yeah, because that problem that we always had is you starting as you were starting. But proceed.
Am I audible now?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. I was saying we welcome the presentations that are before us. However, I do have a few questions. To SCRA, they have made a presentation on page 12 that there's 2 vacant posts in process of being filled. What I'd like to know is that how far is the process? So they have indicated that the SCRA members, they operate at full capacity since they all have their individual offices. But I've also noted with concern that they've indicated that SCRA has only now requested the installation of desk protective screens from the Department of Home Affairs. My question is, when were these requests made, considering that we have had the pandemic since March 2020? And I remember during our first meeting, we emphasized the issue of the safety of the officials. Hence, we also indicated that the department needed to prioritize the issue of PPEs. I do believe that they complied as the face mask, I believe, and the sanitizers and the screens were sent to other Department of Home Affairs offices. But with SCRA, it is only in the presentation that was given to us today that they are mentioning that they have requested these screens. I'd like to know that when was the screens requested and why is it only now? Also, Chairperson, there is a slide that speaks to the minister approving the appointment of 6 SCRA members. However, it is not clear that when did the minister approve this appointment. What I would like to know is that when did the minister approve this appointment? And secondly, there was a line that speaks to only that are going to say 2-year contract, or we would like status of the other 2 and the status of the 2 officials that are supposed to be appointed on a 5-year contract. Chairperson, on the presentation for RAASA, they have indicated that they have inactive cases of about 29,967. And the presenter went further to clarify that when they say a case is inactive, they mean those people are no longer reporting to their offices. Therefore, the presenter also indicated that they still need to find out where they are. Now, my question is, do they have a system in place that they are using to trace these applicants? And on slide 20, they have mentioned that they have appointed the project manager for the backlogs, Ms. Kilebogile Magabo. I would like to know when Ms. Kilebogile Magabo was appointed and when is the project likely to start. There is another slide that the presenter did not speak to, as he assumed that it was covered on the other slide. I think that was slide 2023. What I have picked up is that there was no information on column 4, and also it was not indicated if those posts that were vacant or not filled, what were the reasons for that, or if there are any plans of those posts being filled. So I would like the presenter to go back onto slide number 23 and give us more details on that slide. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Honorable Pillay.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Let me firstly welcome the presentation and also say that I think one of the concerns that as a committee we have is the backlog, which is too large. In fact, if you look at the numbers and you look at a 4-year period, I'm just concerned about whether we're going to be able to meet the target of getting rid of the backlog. I must also appreciate the digitalization of files, and I think that this is going to assist in the process going forward, in that it's going to be able to obviously speed that up, but also be able to, in these conditions of COVID and strict regulations, be able to look at things even on a virtual platform. But I want to draw your attention to the 2000 to 2001, where there was only 1,269 appeals that was finalized out of 27,115. And this actually equals to 4.7%. And now for me, that is very concerning in terms of the number of cases finalized. And I'm hoping that we are going to be able to have a drastic increase when it comes to dealing with the backlog. We also welcome that there was a backlog project and a presentation has been given to us. But what I think is missing for me is the clear timeframes and the targets in terms of figures, because there has to be a monitoring and evaluation. And in order for us to evaluate and measure, there has to be based on key outputs and outcomes. So if they can be a little bit more specific in terms of what the timeframes and the targets are, in order for us to then come back and evaluate after a year and say, we've reached this number, so we need to improve on certain things in order for us to be able to accelerate the process. And then just one last thing is with regards to the SCRA, there was 552 cases that were pending. I just wanted to seek clarity on what does it mean? Does that mean that it's going to be finalized? And if so, why are we delaying the pending cases? Because that will then give us a very high number in terms of finalization. But I think for me overall, I'm happy with what has been presented. We just need to fine tune the monitoring and evaluation of this process and how we can be able to then steadily speed the process of finalization. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we invite responses from the presenters? And then Minister, you'll do the helicopter conclusions once the presenters are there from a policy level. And members, in terms of the items, we're going to take what was supposed to be the last item first. We wish to when we deal with the minutes, I would wish to release even the department so that we do the minutes. They must still go and do other work-related issues in terms of, we're at lockdown level 1. I'm sure they're back into the office. No responses?
Yes, thank you very much to all the committee members for the questions. I will start first, and then my colleague will try and answer questions. I will start first with the Honourable Member Njumi from the EFF. The first question was whether we are prioritizing, as I understood the question, the Cape Town protesters, and whether that's a refugee camp in the first place. From our side, we are literally putting all our resources at the moment on this particular aspect because it's a concern for the country. So we can't be busy with other things at the moment. It's not a refugee camp. We do not have refugee camps in South Africa. These camps were created in terms of the Disaster Management Act. To call it a refugee camp might cause problems in the long term, but we do not have refugee camps in South Africa. That's why we have an integration policy that the Honourable Committee has asked us to ensure. There was a question regarding what information we rely on. Now, I went into some of the international and domestic obligations. So we have very complex cases. It's international law together with our constitution, and it keeps on butting heads in our processes. You have people that's been in the country for many years with children, with families, and we know how our constitution protects the vulnerable. And when it comes to asylum seeker matters, these things do make decisions complicated. And also then delays us in making a decision because we want to make a fair decision within our own context. We have a very unique context in South Africa where we have international law having to feed into our constitution. And we have to strike a balance between the two so that we try and make a fair decision because people have been in the country for a long time. And so we do consider all country of origin information. Now, country of origin information is what they call objective information that we receive from organizations such as Human Rights Watch. But it's called objective because we compare it with all the international organizations that give reports on a particular country. And it's guided by the process set out in the UNHCR handbook for determining refugee status. So we comply with that handbook and the process that's recommended in that handbook. And we use country of origin information that comes from these independent international bodies that reports on the status within that country to make a decision. And each decision is determined on its own merits because each decision will have different aspects. Like, for example, the same person coming from, for example, DRC, from the same area, might have a different claim in terms of their constitutional rights within the South African context, including the rights of children. So these are some of the complicated types of decisions that we have to make, but we do consider all that type of information. I can't really speak on in terms of the migration. I think immigration and the department will be able to answer the honourable member much better in terms of that question. I can do say that we didn't start from 1994. We started off after the promulgation of the Act, which actually only started in 2000. And in 2000, we already had 12,000 cases in backlog. So I don't think the forefathers of our constitution visualized the problem that we eventually inherited as time went on, as more and more people wanted to come. But yes, we do consider the economy in that country and what is the pull factors? You know, what makes a person come to South Africa? We do consider that, but the main information is the country of origin information. And if I may also answer the Honorable Kotze's question in terms of the research capacity. Yes, we didn't have the research capacity, so it meant we had to do it ourselves. We literally spend hours beyond our office hours to try and get the research in place. And you have to constantly update it because things are changing within the country constantly. That's the questions from the Honourable Member of the EFF, Mr. Mchumi. The Honourable Member Kotze asked the question around the cost of litigation. I can't give a specific number on the cost of litigation because the litigation is managed within the department. There's a department, legal services, that deals with the litigation. But I can guarantee you that currently our litigation are reducing because of the increased or the improved procedures that we are implementing. You've also asked the average length of cases. You know, we speak in our presentation about heritage cases and cases that are not heritage. And the heritage cases are the ones that makes our average actually go higher. I can't give you a specific number, but I know there are some cases of people that came during the 2010 World Cup. And we've been unable to deal with them because either we missed them in our communication processes, or we were unable to see that particular person. And they've just been continuously extending their permits. So now we had to go and change the law to allow us to communicate with a person, an asylum seeker, directly. Because the idea was that if an asylum seeker comes to South Africa, they wouldn't normally have an address or a cell phone number. But now that we have people in the country for a longer period of time, they would have acquired these things, and the old system will still be in place for those that don't have a cell phone and doesn't have a registered address. So the reason we changed that is to allow us to have a more efficient process of communicating with asylum seekers. Then they don't have to come to the center constantly to renew their permit, and we can then communicate with them directly to try and finalize their matters. There was a question about the dramatic change in the numbers. I think there are lots of factors that determines when a person comes to South Africa and why they're coming here. And I think in general, we have become less of a pull factor as the New York of Africa in terms of economic migrants, but we are still a pull factor for real refugees that seek protection. So I think the numbers are just an indication that we have less mixed migration, where less economic migrants are coming rather than a decrease in refugees, so to say. There was a question on the case management system. I think we do have a system that manages asylum seekers and refugees. It's called the NIS system, or the National Information System, that manages asylum seekers and their permitting and etc. But there were never a system that manages how this process is concluded from start to finish. Manage that member so that they can finalize the decision within their time period. So I will have a system now in place that allows us to monitor, as the Honourable Member also asked, is there a monitoring system? I think it was Honourable Pillay that asked, is there a monitoring system? We now have a monitoring system to monitor when a person comes within the Refugee Appeals Authority's mandate, when they came, how long are we taking to finalize that matter, and that we ensure the matter is finalized before the period is concluded. I used to work at the CCMA as a commissioner, and I can guarantee you that tribunal don't accept late submissions of decisions. It gives you a time frame in which to finalize the matter, and you get into trouble if you exceed that period, We were never able to monitor that in our system, but now we have a system in place to be able to do that. Another question, I think the last question from Honorable Kotze is regarding the RSDO training. I think, yes, there is a need for training. I think there were training. I mean, we ourselves gave a little bit of training to the RSDO, but we're talking about cases that started in 2010. There were, different RSDOs then. The type of training that was given to them were probably different. So I can't really answer whether training was the issue initially, but I do know that now the RSDOs are much more trained to finalize matters, and they understand what is needed to be done. Obviously, there will be more training needed, and I hope that we are able to run that simultaneously to the project. Honorable Molekwa also asked regarding the inactive cases, whether we are able to trace those individuals. Now, the law doesn't allow us to just stop an application. And if we can't find a person, the law never allowed us to finalize that matter in any event, even if this person is no longer available. So we had to go change the law to allow us to have that process. And now our process is this, that we publish in the Government Gazette, and we publish in local newspapers to try and find the individual, not publishing their name, but their case number, and to give them an opportunity to then come. And if they don't come, there is an RSDO process that will then proceed the matter to be finalized when it comes to inactive cases. But we also know that if more people hear about the project, they will come back to the system. They would want to be involved. They would want the matter to be finalized. So my ultimate hope is that we don't have to trace anybody, and that they will come to the process to finalize the matter. And then lastly, I think the Honorable Mr. Pillay asked regarding the period. The project period is it's a science. It was worked out by a consultant that did the research, and the plan was created based on our processes and how the improvements would assist us. So in the past, we never had benefits of making decisions on paper. So those things will also assist us to make decisions faster. So the period and when will we actually, I gave some feedback on the timeframes that we envisage the project will take to finalize. But I want to say that our final timeframes will only be able to be set after the first phase, which is an auditing phase. Where is the files? Can we have the files electronically? Is the members appointed? Are all the members and the staff in place? So those kind of things will then determine exactly the timeframes of when we should be delivering on any particular case. There was another question from the Honorable Molekwa regarding the slide on the details of the officials that will be appointed. Basically, I don't know if the slides can be shown again, but if I may just try and, it's slide number 23. So the first position is a position of Deputy Director. That's basically a person that's going to manage our office. And we don't, unlike SCRA, we currently don't have an office manager. So that's a very important person in terms of getting them on board so that everybody within our office has a particular reporting line, and it doesn't go everything directly to the chairperson, but that there's an office manager that deals with the administrative staff first, and if there's something that needs to be escalated, it can come to me. The administrative clerks, they are the individuals that assist with getting the file ready so that the member is able to review the file. It then goes to a case manager. The case manager will assist the member in getting the file ready for a decision. So making sure that the researcher has put the country of origin information in there, which is the next position. And then we have assistants that's going to assist us with copying of the files, scanning those files, getting it into the system electronically. So those are the two other posts that we intend to have within the project. I hope that I've answered everybody. If I haven't, I apologize. My colleague.
Sorry, Chairperson. Chair. Chairperson, are you there? On a point of order. I just...
Hey, where's the chairperson?
Okay, well, before we proceed, I just wanted to correct my surname. It's Van der Merwe. Just
I
wanted
dearly apologize. For some other reason, I heard Kotza.
I know it's not a popular surname, so don't worry.
No, Co-Chair, the chair is here. It's just that I was muted by the host. I don't know for what, but it's fine. You can proceed.
From the minutes in the last explanation.
Thank you very much. I'll start with the question from Honorable Pillay.
Yes.
He was talking to our slide number 6, where he said that the 542 are pending, and what does it mean? So, and even if we have, and whether we have, we can monitor as to when these cases will be finalized. First and foremost, let me indicate that most of these applications for certifications are done by attorneys. And then whatever information that we request from them, they usually provide. Like, for instance, I've indicated things like passport. This is where we already have information like MCS indicating that the person has traveled. So we're saying to the person, please provide us with the copies of your passport so that we can see whether you went to these places that we have seen only. Because others, they can go with a passport. For instance, a Somali person uses a Kenya Airways and goes to Kenya. But then from Kenya uses another passport to go to his own country. So those are the things that we are checking. Like, for instance, if you say to a person, provide us with marriage certificate, we will finalize your case. So usually they are finalized within a very short space of time. Thank you very much. Then question from Honorable Molekwa was asking about when did the minister approve the appointment. I think it was second semester in 2020, after June, that was the approval. But then you will note that approval only, you still have to go through the processes. The Director General together with the CFO, they have to check with the funds if they do have funds. And yes, and the process of recruiting, like getting CVs and then interviewing those people. So that process started after June 2020. So we were, during that time, it was the 4 members who are supposed to deal with the backlog. So those 4 members have been interviewed, and then out of, we couldn't appoint 4 members, 3 qualified, 1 couldn't. And the one who qualified, you know, even after qualifying, counter-corruption has to do a risk check. So they went through the risk check and found that one of the members, even though not somebody coming from outside, was married 2 times to the foreigners and did not disclose during the interview. And the act itself says that if you are not a South African, you cannot be appointed to be a SCRA member or an RAA member, because somehow you will be conflicted. You are dealing with the refugee, the foreigners, you dealing with issuing or giving certification for somebody from outside South Africa to become a permanent resident and later to become a citizen. So we appointed only 2. So, but we now in a process, we have already shortlisted for 4 that we are going to interview now before the end of March. And then that was slide 12. Desk protective screens. Okay. We made a request for desk protective screens in 2020, I think it was December. The reason why we did that, we knew that this year, 2021, we're going to have more members in the office. Like for instance, we're going to be having 5 SCRA members instead of, we're going to have 5 in the office and then 2 that are appointed for RRO. Desmond Tutu will also be in our office. So we decided to say, let us divide the boardroom so that each person could be on his or her side, but also with the protective desk screen. So that is when we did it. And then, full capacity, yes. I think I'm done with questions from Honorable Molikwa. No, you have asked a question about the breakdown of the 15,735 cases that SCRA says considered in terms of section 24, 3B. If you go to slide 10, we have already indicated that. Slide 10, at the bottom, slide 10, yes. At the end, it shows grand total of what SCRA has done. It's 15,735. These are the cases that we have attended to last year for those cases. And then the next one, going back, it says upheld on the top, at the top. This upheld means that this is final rejection. These people are supposed to be deported. But the people who are doing the deportation is not SCRA. SCRA will only give a decision and the RRO put it on NIS, and then the cases are referred to deportation or inspectorate. And then setting aside, that is the breakdown. If you add the 3, set aside, referred back, and upheld, it will give you 15,735. So that is the breakdown of the cases. Thank you. I will not be, no, not yet, sir. I will not deal with what my colleague has already answered concerning the research, because he has already done that. And then there's a question which was saying, you said files should be presented to you when you request them. I meant specifically because during the lockdown period, it is difficult to get files simply because the staff are working on rotation basis. At the RRO, you are given a designated person who will assist you. And this person will likely to be on rotation. And you as the SCRA member, you are there every day waiting for the files to be given to you. That is what I meant. Those are the challenges that we had in 2020. But however, even indicated that we already communicated with the centers. They are trying to help that even those that are not designated to assist SCRA, they are now assisting SCRA. And further, that all the cases dating back from 2016 until now, they are kept on NIS. So those ones we get electronically. So the only problem is cases from 2015 back. Okay, the electronic form. Okay, there was a question to say which country are likely to be deported most. I don't know whether it was on our side or on the side of the RAA, but however, let me say that, for instance, a place like
don't want to answer all the questions from your head. Where you are unable to provide immediate answers, just say you'll send a written reply, because you'll answer something wrongly. Next time when you come, it's going to be bad for you. So where you are not clear about issues, just say you will provide written responses. I think that is the spirit that you must answer these questions.
No, thank you so much. But without actually getting into the details, that which I know in the year 2020, most of the cases were from Ethiopia. But I can also provide the written, because we have it in the office. Yes, thank you.
Yes, I think
And it's also and it's also available on NIS. Thank you.
Are you done now?
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Deputy Minister, do you want to say something?
No, I'm covered, Chair.
Minister?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. As you said, again, a helicopter view. I just want to state, Chair, that as we deal with these problems and complexities, let us remember that the issue of refugee, asylum, and migration is not a uniquely South African problem. It's a global problem. It's a global phenomenon. It might be that in the continent of Africa, South Africa is much more on the receiving end than other countries. But this is a global phenomenon. And that's why over the year, Chairperson, there have been lots of conventions, agreements, international obligations signed between countries to guide them on how to resolve this issue of migration and refugees, as well as asylum seekers, Chairperson. Now, South Africa enacted the first legislation in this regard only in 1998. Remember that before that, we were using what is called the Aliens Act, which was an apartheid act calling people aliens. Our Democratic Act only came into being in 1998. That is the Refugee Act of 1998. Then the Immigration Act only was enacted in 2002. Now, Chairperson, when South Africa enacted these acts, they were fashioned mostly along the lines of the United Nations Convention on the Status of Refugee, the Convention of 1951. And that convention is not unambiguous, Chairperson. It's not ambiguous, Chairperson. It's very clear that people earn status, number one, if there is war in their country. And all that we have to determine is war. That's why the various speakers from SCRA and RAASA were mentioning, for instance, about the war in Goma in DRC, that it is not there in Kinshasa, for instance, because it's what is on the United Nations Convention. Secondly, it says if you are persecuted from your country, on at least I can remember 4 grounds. If you are persecuted because of your political practices, political beliefs, and maybe political utterances, if you are persecuted for your religious practices, which maybe the leaders in that country, in that particular country do not want, if you are persecuted for your cultural beliefs and practices, which maybe are in conflict with the beliefs and attitude of leaders in that country. And lastly, if you are persecuted for your sexual orientation, there are countries, I'm sure you are aware, Chairperson, where they only recognize male and female. Anything in between, they regard it as a crime. And South Africa is not one of those countries. So if you are persecuted along those, then you can look for this asylum. Now, The problem comes in, Chairperson, in all these conventions and our laws in the country, it does not mention the issue of economic migration. If you are running away simply because of economic problems, that's where countries start coming with discretion. For instance, when South Africa started giving special permits, the Zimbabwe special permits, the Basotho special permits, the Angolan special permits, they were not based on any of the international obligations or on any of our immigration or refugee laws. It was a country discretion, realizing that there's an economic problem, especially in Zimbabwe, and started giving those special permits. That's why they were special. And people in those special permits could not apply for any of the other issues. I mean, for any of the other benefits in terms of the other legislations, because this was really special, just granting them special status because of recognizing the issue of economy. So in the declarations and our laws, we still have to sit down and look at economic problems, because that is what is now causing more problems around the whole world. The second issue, Chairperson, Honorable Chwaku, the issue of Cape Town protesters, as is we've repeated again and again, that they are in those tents under the disaster regulations. It's not about immigration. And so those are not camps, refugee camps, because by law, there are no refugee camps in South Africa. Now, they are stayed there while it's desirable for RAASA and SCRA to move in. But whether they stay there or we move them will not depend on RAASA and SCRA, will depend on two issues, which this portfolio committee itself has ruled on. Number one, integrate into community. When you integrate them, you integrate everybody, whether he's still an asylum seeker, whether he's got refugee status already, whether he's still applying, whether he's still on appeal, you integrate them into communities and they can do the appeals from there. And then the committee said, if they fail or they refuse integration, it's then that you repatriate them. And when you repatriate them, you start looking at the international laws and obligations and also our own laws in the country. So it doesn't matter how far RAASA and SCRA is, while it's desirable that they must move very fast, but it's not going to determine the fate of those people, at least in those tents. It will determine their fate only in as far as their stay in the Republic is concerned. Now you ask a question, Honorable Chwaku, about whether this issue of refugee status, etc., is happening to people on the African continent or from Europe or Asia. You may remember last week when I announced to the committee that we are going to review permits, I said we are concentrating a lot in our country on people who cross the border illegally to come and buy a loaf of bread or a bag of meal because they are hungry. And obviously those are from the continent. I said we have never focused our attention on the person who comes with a passport, wearing a suit, having a briefcase, wishing to come here to the country to look for a permit of one way or in one or the other. Maybe a permanent residence permit, a study permit, a work visa to establish business. All those are the ones who will be coming from Europe and maybe from the East. And we have not been paying attention to them. That's why I put that committee into existence to start reviewing them, because they were not in the limelight. Those who are in the limelight are the poor people who are coming here just for survival. Chairperson, yeah, I think those are the questions I really needed to answer. Thank you very much, Chair.
Chairperson, can you unmute, please?
I'm saying I'm noting you is a system that mutes me. I'm noting that members say some of the questions are not answered. My request is that those questions that are not answered must be jotted down. Eddie will send them to the presenters and the minister for answering them in writing, so that we're able to conclude the entire business of the committee. I hope that is acceptable, Co-Chair. can we take Adams on the next item?
Thank you, Chairperson. Actually, the next item on the agenda was the adoption of minutes, but I'll briefly just deal with the resolution tracking document that
No, Adams. I have made it very clear that I want us to deal with the items that needs the department first, and then will remain for the minutes that needs only the committee. It will be unfair to keep the minister and the deputy minister in this meeting when we're dealing with issues that do not involve them. So we start with this one. When we're done, they leave. Then we remain with our minutes as the committee.
Understood, sir. Yes, the members, I'm not going to go through all of the issues, but basically we just went through all the minutes outstanding from February 2020 all the way up to last week's meeting, and listed all the outstanding issues that hadn't already been addressed in some meeting or in some document by the DHA. We then indicated in the column D there who was responsible in those respective outstanding issues and who was going to deal with them, and some comments where there was progress but not finalization of the issues. And here we indicate that all those issues are still pending, and once they're finalized, we'll just put finalized in there so we can see how much of what was issued, what was outstanding is addressed. And then finally, the dates at which they were pending, which was last week, which we'll update on a weekly basis. This document we'll also put on a shared document on Google Documents, so that when it's updated, we don't have to send the new document every time, but you can just access the link and be able to check the progress as issues go. And then to date, in total, there are 55 issues still outstanding from the past year. And this document will be has been shared, I believe, by Eddie with the department already, and we'll schedule a meeting or get a presentation on the outstanding matters as our committee program allows. So that's that for the time being. That was just a brief overview, so.
Are you done?
Yes, sir.
Chairperson?
Yes.
I was saying, Chairperson, can Adams sort out, as you said, sort out those actions from the department? Can he sort that out from Excel so that he can see what are the actions that the department is supposed to do or pending, something like that? And then we can go through them very quickly. That can take us about 5 minutes, I think.
Do you understand that, Adams?
I can do that, sir. Yes.
Our view was our view was that we'll check what is pending and what, so that the minister can quickly and the DM and the DG to give us a quick update, so that in our next meeting we check the improvement on the pending issues.
Yes, sir. So now there are several issues.
Chairperson.
Yes, Minister.
Yeah, Chairperson, may I ask for your indulgence? I'm just making a proposal. If it is not good, I will accept the ruling of the committee. I looked at all these issues that are pending, and I'm quite aware that quite a number of them have been done. Maybe a report has just not been submitted. I don't know for what reason, because quite a number of them, I'm surprised to see them there as pending. Can you give us up to, whether you give us 48 hours or up to Friday, to write in each one of them how far these issues are in writing, rather than looking now and coming to do guesswork, because I know that many of them have been done, and I'm surprised to see them here. I think there's been a breakdown of communication, perhaps between us and the Secretariat, about what was done and what was not done.
It is accepted, Minister. I think just take this presentation and maybe respond in writing. Maybe in our next meeting, we will then compare what we have sent and what Adams has. And please, Adams and Eddie, just do the due diligence in terms of what is exactly pending and what is perceived to be pending. I grant what the minister is proposing, and that takes us to the next item. Minister and Deputy Minister DG, thank you very much for being part of this meeting, and the presenters from SCRA and RAASA. We really thank you very much. Those questions that are not answered, please answer them in writing, and we'll now proceed to take the minutes. Thank you very much, Minister and Deputy. You can be excused. You can remain if you want to remain, but you are excused.
No, some of us already got cabinet committee meetings that are on already. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
Thank you. Let's proceed to minutes. We'll proceed with minutes in the following manner because there are many of them. I'm going to give to Eddie, and we'll take them set by set. Then Eddie will lead that process of running the minutes. If a member has something to say, you'll indicate to me, but they were circulated right on time. I think it shouldn't be a difficult exercise. Over to you, Eddie.
Okay, Chairperson. What I'll do here, I think Adam will be screening the minutes, but also I've written down here that we have got minutes of the 21st of July, 2020, wherein we're dealing with issues of policy in regard to the Constitutional Court instruction to amend the Electoral Act. So then I'll just call, we have got 6 pages on that one. So page number 1, if there's any amendment that is needed. Page 2. I'm just assuming that members have read the minutes. Then page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Then the last page is page 6. Is there any amendments? It seems as if there's no amendment, Chairperson. If you can call for a mover and a seconder.
Members, any mover for the adoption? We are muted, Coach.
I will move for the adoption.
Comrade Zell is moving, and Honorable Asnat is seconding. Next set.
Okay, Chair. Then the next set is minute of 18 August, wherein the roadmap was on the implementation of the Electoral Act, Constitutional Court Electoral Act was presented. And then we're on page 1 now. Any changes on page 1? This was a joint meeting with the Select Committee. Page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Is there any amendments on any of the pages? It seems as if there's no amendments. If you can call for a mover and a seconder.
Any mover?
I move for the adoption, Chair.
Chair. Any seconder?
Chair.
Honorable Veteran. Unmute, Veteran.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
Are we talking about the electoral act that we had moved? What are we talking about now? Which are these
We're
minutes
talking about a set of minutes that of the meeting that was held on the 18th of August, July 2020. You will recall, Honorable Veteran, that we have not been doing minutes. So we're rounding up minutes as from last year to now. We're not in any way dealing with the matter that you presented. And the matter you presented is a matter that is now in the attention of the speaker for what we have agreed in that meeting.
No. I'm waiting. Thank you.
I'm waiting for the speaker to respond on the roadmap that we've agreed after we have presented. So these are all the minutes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any seconder?
RAASA seconds, Chair.
Thank you. Next set of minutes.
Then the next set of minutes is the minutes of the 25th of August, 2020. Okay, I won't wait for Aria. 25th of August, wherein SITA was briefing the committee on the issue of ABIS in EOH. And then page 1, is there any change on page 1? Page 2? Page 3? 4? 5? 6? And 7. That's the last page. Is there any amendment to the minutes? And then if there are no amendments, over to you, Chairperson.
This picture that you put there, Honorable Chwago, your hand is up, so as if you're raising a hand, you see. Can I take a move of adoption?
Yes, Chairperson, I'll move for the adoption.
Honorable Lezelle, move. Can I get a second?
I was not around, Chair, during these meetings.
But don't raise your hand in that picture, please.
Yes.
Please, man.
At least he's got
Any seconder?
RAASA seconds, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Vice Seconds. Next set of minutes.
The next set of minutes is
I need a meeting of Home Affairs Committee leader.
You also second, Honorable Veteran?
Comrade Antoinette, I'm in a meeting of Home Affairs Committee.
Okay, proceed, Eddie.
Okay, the next one is set of minutes that took place on the 1st of September 2020.
Meeting of Home Affairs Committee.
Okay, let me try to mute Mr. Likota. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, then is the minutes of the meeting that took place on the 1st of September 2020, where we were dealing with the issue of processing refugees in the Cape Town. Then page 1, any changes? Page 2, 3, and 4. It seems as if there are no changes. Over to you, Chairperson.
Any mover? Mover for adoption. Honorable Mudisa moves for adoption. Any seconder?
Seconded, Chairperson.
Honorable Mulekwa seconds. Next set of meeting.
The next set of minutes is 6 October 2020. Where we're dealing with the first quarter expenditure report of the department. Page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, and 6. Is there any changes that members would like to make? No changes, Chairperson. You can move a mover and a seconder.
Any mover?
I will move for the adoption, Chair.
Honorable Lizelle moves seconder.
I will second, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Medisa. Next set.
Sorry, Chair.
Honorable Kanyile.
It was
Honorable Kanyile.
Then the next set of minutes is minutes that took the meeting that took place on 9th of October 2020, wherein we were being briefed by the IEC on the Electoral Act, which is currently in the NSOP, and then the response by the IEC and the DRRR. So, any changes on page 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It appears that there are no changes, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Any mover?
I will move for the adoption, Chairperson.
Honorable Lizelle moves. Any second?
Kanyile will second, Chairperson.
Honorable Kanyile seconds. Thank you.
Then the next set of minutes is the meeting that took place on the 20th of September. No, the 20th of, there was a mistake there. Chair, I think the September there, it has to be October. Then we'll make that change. So this is the meeting wherein we're still getting an update on the issue of refugees. And then page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Is there any change, any amendments? Nothing, no amendments, Chairperson.
Any mover?
Lekwase moves, Chair.
Honorable Hassan moves. Second?
I will second.
Second that, Chairperson.
Honorable Mulikwa seconds. Next set.
Next set is 23rd of October, where we're dealing with the issue of essential service that was suggested by the IEC and the Electoral Act and the briefing by the Legal Service of Parliament. Also the revised annual performance plan by the department. Yeah, those are the issues. And then page 1, is there any amendment on page 1? Page 2? Page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Is there any amendments? Chair, there's nothing, no amendments.
Any mover?
Modise moves for the adoption.
Honorable Modise moves. Second?
Second that, Chairperson.
Honorable Mulikwa and Honorable Kanyile seconds. Thank you. Next set.
Then the next minute is the meeting that was held on the 27th of October 2020, where we're dealing with the issue of CETA. We're also dealing with the consequence management in the areas. And then we're also dealing with, yeah, those are the issues that we're dealing with. And then page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Any amendments? Chair, seems if there are no amendments. Any
mover?
I move for the adoption of the minutes, Chairperson.
Second?
Second, Chairperson.
Next set.
The next set is the minutes of the meeting that took place on the 10th of November 2020, where the content advisor was briefing the committee on the submissions that were received on the electoral laws amendment bill. I'll move from page 1. Any amendments on page 1? Page 2, 3, 4. I think the last, I think the last one was 4. Any amendments on any of the pages?
Mover.
I will move for the adoption.
Honorable Rizal move. Second.
Seconded, Chairperson.
Honorable Kwase and Honorable Mulika seconds.
Okay, then the next set of minutes is 17 November, where we're dealing with the issue of Professor Bushiri, the escape from South Africa, and then also the response by the IEC on the submissions on the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Any amendments on any of the pages? Over to you, Chair.
Mover.
I move for the adoption, Chairperson.
Mulika moves. Second.
Lekwase, Chair.
The Kwase seconds. Next set.
The next one is minutes of the meeting of the 24th of November 2020, where we're dealing with the Electoral Laws Amendment Bill and also the BRRR. And then I'll just move to page 1. Any page 1, 2, 3, and 4. Any amendments? Chair, over to you.
Any mover? Move.
I'll move.
Thank you. Honorable Rizal moves.
Second.
Honorable
Seconded, Chairperson.
and Honorable Mulika seconds. Next set.
The next set is minutes of the meeting that took place on the 27th of November, wherein the committee was deliberating on the Electoral Laws Amendment Bill. Page 1, 2, and 3. Any amendments in any of the pages?
Any mover?
I move, Chair.
The Kwase move. Second.
Van der Merwe will second. Thank you, Chairperson.
Co-chairs seconds. Next set.
Okay, the next set is minutes of the meeting that took place on the 1st of December. That's when we are finalizing the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. Any amendments on the minutes?
No, Chief, you must go page by page first.
No, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mover.
Modise moves.
Honorable Mulika moves. Second.
Lekwase seconds, Chair.
The Kwase seconds. Next set.
Then the next set is minutes of the meeting that took place on the 26th of January, 2021, wherein we're dealing with the issue of the annual report of the Department of Home Affairs and the issue of the permits at the Royal Bafokeng mine. And then page 1, any amendment from page 1? Page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. There any amendments in of the pages?
If none, any mover?
Modise moves.
Honorable Modise moves. Seconder?
Seconded, Chairperson.
Moleko seconds. Next set.
Then the next set is the minutes of the meeting that took place on 9 February this year. And then that's where the Minister of Home Affairs briefed the committee on the readiness for the reopening of the ports of entry. And then the issue of the permits at the Royal Bafokeng mine. And also progress made on the development of the policy to amend the Electoral Act as directed by the Constitutional Court, and also the briefing by Mr. Lekota on the Electoral Laws Amendment Bill 34/2020. Then page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Any amendments in any of the pages? Chair, over to you.
Any mover?
Chair, I'll move.
I move for adoption, Chairperson.
Is that Pillay now?
Yes, Chair. That was the meeting
Yeah,
I was present.
No, I already granted Chabane status who could have participated. I'm joking. Pillay moves. Seconder is Honorable Molikwa. The next set.
This was the last set. We adopted 16 set of minutes. Then the minutes of the 23rd of February and the 26th of February, we'll adopt them next week.
That is fine, but I want to encourage that we don't pile these minutes for this long. At least after every 2-3 meetings, we must adopt the minutes. Otherwise, members are busy with a lot of other things and committees. So they may have not I don't want to use the word forgotten, but something like that may have happened if we were to deal with something before Christmas, you know. So it is encouraged that you don't have 3 meetings without dealing with minutes. Is that agreed?
Yes, Chairperson.
Yeah, then thank you very much. What is the next item?
That was all, Chairperson, on the today's agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. Members.
Except that, Chairperson, I'm sorry. Maybe you're going to mention the issue of the Electoral Laws Amendment Bill, which we finalized on the 1st of December. I was informed that is going to go into the SOP today. There are proposed amendments, which I've not seen, but I'll request them. And then now is also urgent because our last meeting is going to be on the 16th of March. So by then we should have finalized, you know, that bill so that it can go to the National Assembly again. So like I discussed with you this last week was that we are going to have the IEC briefing the committee on the 9th on this bill, so that now we can fast track it, so that it can go to the National Assembly before recess. That's all, Chair, from me.
That is an announcement.
Yeah, that would be, yeah.
Okay, if that is an announcement, members, thank you very much for attending the meeting. It was a good meeting, fruitful. We'll then meet in our next meeting. This meeting stays adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chairperson.